Howdy, folks. Welcome to Redneck Gone Green. I'm David Cobb, your host. I am the Redneck, and you bet I've gone green, and I'm trying to convince you to do so as well. Because for me, going green means, yes, deep ecology, understanding the interconnectedness of life itself and the need for sustainability. It also means the Green Party. It means a political party that refuses to take corporate money, a political party that is absolutely committed to the four pillars of peace, justice, democracy, and ecology. And I want to remind you that here on Redneck Gone Green, we are a source of non-corporately filtered news, information, and analysis. So the algorithms work against us, y'all. So what I'm asking you to do, you know what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to like, to comment, and to share, to help us build an audience here for Redneck Gone Green so we can continue to bring this weekly program where we push ourselves and you, the audience, around what is it that we need to know, what is it that we need to feel, and what is it that we need to do. And I feel like this show today is going to be a prime example of it because we're going to be talking to Dr. Anna Malinow. Dr. Malinow spent 3 decades working as a pediatrician with immigrant, refugee, and underserved children in Ohio, Texas, Pennsylvania, and California. She has retired now as a clinical professor of pediatrics from the University of California, San Francisco School of Medicine. She's the past president of Physicians for a National Health Program. She's been featured on national and international television and radio programs. She is currently lead organizer for the National Single Payer and the movement to end privatization of Medicare. Dr. Anna Malinow, welcome to Redneck Gone Green.
David, it is such a pleasure to be here today. Thank you so much.
Now, I need to get this out of the way because, Anna, you and I know each other, don't we?
From a long time ago. Yes, we do.
So I just want to admit, y'all, so Anna and I were both co-organizers and I dare say co-founders of the Harris County Green Party of Texas. And I want to say, as a doctor, right, I didn't know that Anna was a doctor. I just knew she was a social justice advocate. She joined us in the circle, helped set up the chairs. We were talking about all the different things. So Anna is a doctor, an organizer, but a different type. And when I saw that you were a national leader of single payer, I was not surprised at all, Anna, but I was also really excited to get you onto this program so that you could help educate myself and our viewers about what is the state of the movement to bring healthcare as a fundamental human right to the United States. So tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing with single payer.
So, the state of the movement can either be really great news or not so good news. The great news is that we have a lot of work ahead of us, but that it is doable. And with all of us involved, I think that we can make a difference. The bad news, of course, is that, our healthcare system, such as it is in crisis, right? And but I kind of want to talk about what's right in our healthcare system, right? Because everybody's always talking doom and gloom, and I think that there's some things that are just really, really good about our healthcare system. So take a look at corporate profits, for example, right? In 2022, the revenues for the largest health insurance corporations was $1.25 trillion 1 year. And the combined profits of Moderna, BioNTech, and Pfizer that thankfully gave us the COVID vaccines. Well, their combined profits were during the pandemic, during COVID, were $1,000 per second. So some things are going right in our healthcare system. The problem is that they're going right for the profiteers and the corporations and not for the people. And so, Naomi Klein has said that our healthcare system should be a manifestation of our values. And the truth is that when you look at our values, if our values are to put profits above health, to put corporations above people, then yes, if those are our values, then our healthcare system is going to be what it is, which is, as we know, is broken, is in shambles. We have a very, very high maternal mortality rate, higher than peer nations. We have a high infant mortality rate. We have 110 million people who have medical debt. We have 30 million uninsured, 40 million underinsured, and we're about to even add more people to the rolls of the uninsured because of the Medicaid unwinding. Only a country such as ours could have set up a healthcare system that is so racialized and so discriminatory that it has, healthcare for the poor, it's going to be this, and you're going to have to, apply for it month after month after month. And then healthcare for the rest is going to be over here. So there are many reasons why we need a movement, and I'll be very happy to talk about our movement, which is National Single Payer. You can find out more about us on our website, nationalsinglepayer.com. But if you have specific questions, I can tell you. I don't want to keep on talking if you have questions for me right now.
Well, and that was a fantastic opening, and I really appreciated the framing, because I do want to get into specifics. I also, here on Redneck Gone Green, we tell the truth as we see it. Like you, we don't want to be doom and gloom, but we want to actually assess what is happening so that we can make plans to make the changes. One of the things that I take as a matter of faith is, now that I understand how the healthcare system operates, it's either broken, one could say, it's certainly in crisis, right? But here's one of the things that I've realized. The problem is that in this country, we treat healthcare like a commodity to be bought and paid for at a profit. And if you understand that's the basic driving force, then you say, well, the system is working because it's doing what it's designed to do, to treat healthcare as a profit. And it's a commodity, or as a commodity for a profit. And that's why you have one system for the poor and one system for the wealthy. And I would even argue yet another system, for middle class folk. But here's the thing. If we believed our true moral principles and values, if we said, no, healthcare is a human right. And as a society, if you are sick or ailing or injured, as a society, we take care of each other, right? It's not some abstraction called government. It's actually democracy. We take care of each other, right? So if we say that healthcare is a human right, that we want to ensure that anyone who has a need gets it met, then you'd say, well, this system is crazy. This doesn't work. And so to me, starting from a frame of, do we believe that healthcare is a human right? If we actually start with that question, then the conversation will go in a certain direction. And one of the things that I noticed about what y'all are doing at National Single Payer, and I do want to say, folks, go to nationalsinglepayer.com, is you literally start from that premise.
Absolutely. So we are a grassroots organization of individuals that work locally for national legislation, for national single payer. And we are bound by the principles that healthcare is a human right. So there you go. That healthcare should be free from corporate profit, and that we are going to achieve, and the only way that we're going to achieve national single payer is through national legislation. We don't believe that this is something that can be left to that a human right can be left to the states. And I'm sure this is going to get me into hot water with all my friends and colleagues and fellow activists here in California. But that is national single payer in a nutshell. And we started actually in 2021, right at the eve of President Biden's coming into office, because we recognized and we realized that, suddenly we had a president in the White House who was a Democrat. We had a Democratic Senate, and then we had a Democratic House of Representatives. And so everything really seemed to be aligned. Plus, we were in the middle of a pandemic, right? And so what more do we need in order to say what we need national single payer, and this is how we're going to get it done, because we have a mandate. 60% of Americans support national legislation for national single payer. And then we have all these Democrats in office, right? Plus a pandemic. And yet it became very, very clear to us that that was not going to happen. And many of the activists around the country, feeling this, decided that we were just going to get together and start organizing a national movement for national single payer. And that's how we started in 2021. And we've been working ever since, and we have different campaigns, and people can go to our website to hear more about it. But basically, we believe that the root of the problem is that we have a profit-driven, market-driven healthcare system. And as long as we have profit at the center of our healthcare system is going to continue to be in crisis. And it's going to benefit the profiteers over the health of our nation. And I don't believe that the health of our nation should be held hostage for the profits of corporations.
Well, it's really interesting, Anna, because it's true. I've heard that 60% for specifically single payer. What's interesting is I've seen other studies that if you strip away and just ask, do you think healthcare, if injured people should have access to healthcare, it goes up as high as 70%, right? So even if you don't talk about the single payer model, and we'll get into why I believe and you believe that single payer is the way to ensure to treat healthcare as a human right, I just want to point out that by every reasonable measurement, you see that there is genuine supermajority support for this position within ordinary Americans. And that cuts across party labels. It cuts across ideologies, principled liberals, principled conservatives, moderates, regardless of how people self-identify, there is strong support here. I do want to lift up a comment that Z Manny, who is a frequent listener and commenter, made. Z Manny says, the healthcare industry is a prime example for how dangerous it is to use corporations to administer society. How their programming as profit vacuum cleaners leads them to distort the function. So thank you, Z Manny, because I think that that's just another way to describe, Anna, what you were talking about, corporate profits and allowing health insurance to make, and insurance adjusters and claims adjusters to make decisions about access to healthcare. It's absurd, right? Like this idea of claims adjusters having to go through that process. I mean, if you're my doctor, I can't just rely on and do what the doctor might say. We literally have insurance adjusters and insurance corporations that are deciding what I'm allowed or not allowed to have.
Right. It's this American exceptionalism because you don't see that anywhere else in the world.
So
but here in the United States.
So explain to folks, when you say American exceptionalism, that's for me, a highly charged word. I think it's absolutely accurate, but I want to invite you to explain, why did you use the term American exceptionalism in this context?
Well, it is a highly charged word, obviously, and it's comes from our American imperialism, but the way that I was using it here in healthcare is that we are exceptional, but really we're alone, much more than exceptional when it comes to healthcare, because when you do compare our outcomes to other peer nations, we don't do as well. And when you compare our healthcare costs to peer nations, we outspend practically every other country by twice as much. So that's what I meant by American exceptionalism.
And thank you. I knew that you'd nail it, because this whole notion of imperialism, like, it's this some idea, and I'll confess, I grew up on it, right? Like, I was born in 62, Anna. So, and, I remember as a little boy being taught that America was special. We were like the great shining light on the hill, and that we would bring liberty, justice, democracy to the entire world. And Anna, I was so proud to be an American. I still remember that, right? And and the thing is, that's a creation myth. And as I grew up, I realized, damn it, they lied to me. They lied to me. This, like, the founding of this country was actually a founding violence. It was a founding violence against the indigenous people who were already here. It was a founding violence against the enslaved Africans who were forced to build this country with slave labor. It was a founding violence against my ancestors who were brought here also in chains as indentured servants. I mean, like there's like once you understand the truth of the American exceptionalism, it becomes horrific. And with healthcare, it is equally exceptional, right? Because let me ask you this pop quiz, Dr. Anna Malinow. How many industrialized countries do not have a single payer system to be able to guarantee healthcare?
Well, single payer again is it's not universal,
Oh,
but
thank you.
but
Thank you. I
however,
misspoke. Yeah, correct me.
however, we are alone in not having a universal healthcare system for all of our residents. That is for sure.
Got it.
Whereas we do it through single payer or through a national health service or in other ways, that remains to be seen. We believe that the best way to do it here in the United States would be to expand on an already proven program that has been around for 58 years, and it's called Medicare. And so what we would need to do is simply improve the Medicare that we have, because the current Medicare right now has a lot of gaps and problems and costs associated with it. And then we would need to expand it from cradle to grave.
And so it's interesting and thank you for the correction, right? Like, because one of the things that we really want to do here on Redneck Gone Green is be a place where we really educate each other. And so I very much appreciate that correction. And it leads me to see if I've got it right. My understanding is that in the US, there are actually two single payer systems. There is Medicare, which you qualify for at the age of 65. And then there's a couple of other exceptions, but really it came up and out of, Medicare for folks 65 and older. And then there's the Veterans Administration, which is a single payer system. Is that right? Are those the two main single payer systems?
So let's define what single payer means. Single payer means that you have public financing and private delivery of your healthcare system. So that's exactly what Medicare is. It is public financing and it is private delivery. Now, the VA also is a single payer system in that it is public financing, but it is more of a national health service because it has the public delivery of it as well. So physicians, hospitals, providers all work under the VA, and it is, sort of like owned by the VA. And so when you're a physician, you work for the VA rather than having your own private practice or working for a hospital system. So that's the difference between Medicare and the VA, despite the fact that both are single payer systems because they're both publicly financed. It's just the difference in the delivery of healthcare between the two.
Got it. And so for you and the folks at the single payer, nationalsinglepayer.com, y'all are promoting a single payer payment system, everybody in, nobody out, but to allow the private delivery of healthcare through individual physicians and so forth. And that's the distinguishing characteristic, more or less, between the VA or Veterans Administration and how Medicare works.
Exactly. And if you wanted to pull up one of our 12 guiding principles, I think that the problem with the private delivery of healthcare is becoming more and more problematic. And our last, we have 12 guiding principles, and our last one talks about opening up the conversation to the possibility that a national health service could be placed on the nation's agenda. Because what is happening today is that our delivery system is being gobbled up more and more by private insurance companies, by United Healthcare, which is the largest insurance company in the United States, also is the largest the largest employer of physicians in the United States. It employs 70,000 physicians. And it's being taken over by private insurance companies, by Medicare Advantage plans, by private equity firms, by venture capital firms, and for-profit hospital systems. And so what is happening to our delivery system is that even if we were to have a publicly financed healthcare system, such as a Medicare for All, say, an improved Medicare for All, we would then be giving, funneling our public tax dollars to these private equity firms and to Medicare Advantage. Well, they wouldn't be Medicare Advantage plans anymore, but they would be private health insurance companies and so forth that would then be delivering the health care that we would be paying them for. So even though I believe that if we were to have a really great single payer bill, and we can talk a little bit about the two bills in Congress right now, HR 3421, which is which is the one in Congress, which I think is the better bill. That still allows for for-profit corporations to function in our system. And I think that we need to start having a conversation about what do we want to do with our dollars, our public dollars? Should the public system be truly public? Who should own our healthcare system, right? Should the owners be health insurance companies? Should the owners be huge hospital systems that are consolidating and increasing prices? Or should it be the community? Should it be the patients? And so I think that's another conversation that we need to start having outside of sort of a national single payer conversation.
Well, thank you so much for bringing that up. And I'll tell you, you've already solicited or provoked and instigated some conversation here on our comment section. So I'm going to go to Kelly and then Lewis. Kelly says, the insurance corporations take away the power. We pay them for insurance. They ideally work for us, and yet they dictate where, when, and if we get care, right? So it's kind of the big picture point that you made. I'm also now going to go to Lewis because Lewis has made a couple of points, and I want you to get a chance to respond to both Kelly and Lewis. Lewis says, Medi-Cal will pay for a root canal, the removal of the top of the tooth, and pay for the post, but does not cover the permanent caps for the tooth. The decision of medical insurances are about profit. Lewis goes on to say, Medicare only covers 80% of the medical services. State medical insurance covers 20%. I mean, is that right? I'll confess my own ignorance of this. Anna, I'm 61, right? I got that good socialized medicine in my track. I had this idea that when I hit 65, I'd qualify for all this. But now what I'm hearing is the Medicare system is actually in trouble and it's under attack.
Well, okay. So both callers or viewers are correct to a certain extent. One is, yes, insurance companies take away power from us, but they're not there to work for us at all. I think that would be a naive way of putting it, because they're there to work for themselves and for their bottom lines and for their shareholders and CEOs and so forth. The second caller, I think Lewis, brings up a really important point, and that is the problems or the deficiencies in our Medicare system. And it is so Medicare is made up of Part A and B, and A covers 100% of your hospital costs once you turn 65, or if you qualify for Medicare because you have ALS, which is Lou Gehrig's disease, or you have end-stage renal disease, such as people on dialysis. So it covers 100% of hospitalizations of your hospital costs up until 60 days. After that, then it gets a little bit trickier. There are deductibles, and I believe it's like $1,500 per hospitalization every year. But for the most part, A is great. You go to the hospital, covers 100% of your hospital costs. Part B, so that's just hospital, right? Because that leaves out a whole other section, which is outpatient, right? When you go to your doctor, when you go to the specialist, when you get that CT, when you get the MRI, when you get your blood work, your chest X-ray, all of those costs are not covered by Part A, they're covered by Part B. And Part B covers only 80% of those outpatient costs, which means that you as a patient are on the hook for the 20%, right, left over. And why do we even have a Part A and a Part B in Medicare? And most people don't even realize this, but the passage of Medicare in 1965 was very, very hard fought. And there needed to be a lot of accommodation to special interests such as hospitals, insurance companies, and doctors, plus Republicans and the Southern Democrats. And so what Medicare ended up being, the sausage making at the end of what passed as Medicare in 1965, had to accommodate all of those special players. And one way that it accommodated them is that it made Part A involuntary, maybe meaning that, David, when you turn 65, you're going to get an email from Medicare saying you are automatically, once you pay into Social Security for 10 years, you automatically are eligible for A, and you're going to get your Part A card. Now, Part B is voluntary, and so you have to sign up for it. Plus, you have to pay premiums every month for that B, and the premiums depend on your income. And then you're on the hook for the extra 20%. So the caller Lewis was correct. You are on the hook for the 20% of your outpatient costs. And so what a lot of people do is either they purchase a private health insurance plan to pay for that extra 20% that Medicare B doesn't cover. And that's all that health insurance plan will do, but it's very expensive. It can cost $300 or $350 per month per person. So, if you're living on a fixed income, $350 a month to pay for that, just that 20% that Medicare doesn't cover, can be a lot of money. Some people that have great retiree benefits will then can have their former employers pay for that 20%, which is great. Or their unions can pay for it. So, and there's a huge fight in New York City that if you want to, we can talk about what is happening there. But basically, A and B is called traditional or original Medicare, and the outpatient costs are only covered 80%. And so you are on the hook for that other 20%. Now, that's just for people that are on what we call traditional Medicare, for people that choose to stay on traditional Medicare. However, you probably have heard that about 50% of beneficiaries on Medicare now choose a private health insurance company or a private health insurance plan called Medicare Advantage to manage the care of their needs once they turn 65. And it's as if you didn't have enough of your private health insurance plan when you were working. Now you can choose to have a private health insurance plan, manage your care, and decide when, where, and what of your health care you're going to get once you retire and you turn 65, or once you turn 65. And the advantage of this Medicare Advantage is that because it is overpaid by Medicare to provide these benefits to the tune of about $75 billion a year, they can actually afford to offer low or no cost premiums to individuals on Medicare. And so individuals that are now signing up for Medicare and they say, oh, wow, I either have to pay $350 for this premium every single month, plus the B premiums, plus no out-of-pocket caps, or I can choose this Medicare Advantage plan where I don't have to pay any premiums at all, and they do cover my A and B and my prescription drug costs. Then a lot of people are incentivized. Plus, the dental, the hearing, the vision, the transportation, the gym memberships, which traditional Medicare is actually prohibited from offering Medicare beneficiaries. Then people look and they figure that it's a lot less expensive to join a Medicare Advantage plan. However, the problem is that once you need health care, then that's when people on Medicare Advantage run into problems, because for all of these gym memberships, what you do is you sign up for narrow networks, and so you have to go in the networks of the Medicare Advantage plan, and prior authorizations as well. And they do not include, for example, centers of excellence if you are diagnosed with a rare cancer. So there are a lot of downsides, a lot of disadvantages to Medicare Advantage.
Folks, you're listening and or watching Redneck Gone Green. I'm your host, David Cobb. I am the Redneck, and you bet I've gone green, and I'm trying to convince you and millions of others to do it, so we can build a movement powerful enough to not only ensure healthcare is a human right and change our healthcare system, but also to address the climate crisis, to dismantle the corporate empire. I mean, I really am an unabashed peaceful revolutionary. I believe it is possible to restructure society, and not just possible, that we can actually do it. We're talking to Dr. Anna Malinow. Dr. Malinow, my friend Anna, who I've known way back in the day, as we say. Dr. Malinow spent 3 decades working as a pediatrician with immigrant, refugee, and underserved children across this country. She's the past president of Physicians for a National Health Program. Today, she's the lead organizer for National Single Payer and the movement to end privatization of Medicare. You can find out more about her work and about the single payer movement at nationalsinglepayer.com. Anna, I do want to let you know that you did, once again, you've solicited a lot of good conversation in the comment section. I do want to say that Z-Manny came in and said, Medicare for All is a valuable example of a bill that captures the problem overall and shows how to respond comprehensively and focus the conversation to set example of how to overhaul other industries. And I think that's an astute observation. I mean, the approach that the Medicare for All is doing is to say, here is a problem, and rather than piecemeal it, here is the comprehensive solution. Do you think Z-Manny has got it right?
Oh, she's right on the money. Absolutely. I agree 100%. I think that if we were to be able to achieve a national single payer program here in the United States, can you imagine what that would do to all of the other activists that are fighting for social justice, for housing, for the environment, for the against the carceral system, police? Can you imagine what kind of a boost that would give us all in the social justice movement? I agree 100%. It could be a template, really, for other movements.
One thing that I do want to sort of point out about what we're actually up against is the experience I had here in, as you know, Anna, you and I knew each other in Texas. I moved to California back in 2003, right? And when I came here, there was a fight for a statewide Medicare for All package, a bit of legislation. And I got very excited because it got out of the state assembly or the state House of Representatives. It got out of the state Senate. And all it had to do was get a government or the governor's signature, right? So, and to be clear, it was a comprehensive statewide Medicare for All, basically. It was not just a declaration. It was actual legislation that would have enacted it. Governor Schwarzenegger, the Republican, refused to sign it. The next election cycle, Governor Brown, a Democrat, got elected. And so many of us naively thought, we're in, yay. And I got to tell you, I am still just spitting mad because we could not get that bill out of the assembly, like a committee in the assembly. And that's when I realized, these neoliberal Democrats are playing political football. They don't really mean it, right? They were just advancing single payer, or some of them were advancing single payer just to embarrass Schwarzenegger. Now, I know the lead sponsor was a true believer. There were so many true believers. So, Dr. Malinow, I got to ask, how is it, how do we actually ensure that we know that we have advocates who are actually championing a single payer system? How do we make that determination?
Oh, I think it's really hard. So, one of the reasons why we started a national health program, national single payer, back in 2021 was because we thought that everything was really lining up, right? We had a Democrat in the White House, Democrats in the Senate, Democrats in the House of Representatives, and a pandemic. And we thought, this is it. We are really going to be able to get this moving. And yet that really did not happen at all. In fact, what we were told is to go back to our state legislatures, back to the state, and see if we could pass state single payer bills at the state level. And so, and then, and that didn't happen either, right? So I think I don't know. I don't know how you tell, honestly. I think you obviously want to make sure that you elect the right people, and then that they stay true to their word.
And I got to say, this is one of the things that I think that Bernie Sanders inspired such a momentum, a grassroots momentum back in 2016 and then again in 2020, is because he had a lifetime of advocating for not just social justice issues and racial justice issues broadly, but healthcare as a human right was one of those things. And, it's interesting because, I talked about my experience in California, and you talked about your experience under Biden, and then I am reminded, I forgot. But during Obama, when Obama first came in, I remember I had colleagues from the Physicians for a National Health Plan who wanted to testify at the hearings, and literally they arrested doctors and nurses at the committee hearing rather than allow them to even testify. And this is what I really again, this is not to be jaundiced. This is to say, let's be clear-eyed about the fact that if we don't build a movement that is politically conscious and educated and is engaged and willing to be disruptive, we're going to fall for the okie doke. And to me, I think that this, I'm answering my own question, really. To me, we need a movement that is broad, but deep and committed. And one of the things that makes me excited about the nationalsinglepayer.com is the level of clarity that y'all have about what the demand is. And you've got a program to educate people. So, Anna, I want to make sure to give you a little bit of time about talking about some of the upcoming efforts that y'all have, because I want to make sure that our listeners and viewers have a chance to hear about those.
Thank you, David. Yes, I would love to be able to tell you about the things that we do in National Single Payer. So we have several campaigns. One of the campaigns is really, really interesting, and I'd like to take a minute to talk about. It's a campaign that started in Dunn County, Wisconsin, which put the a non-binding referendum on the ballot, on a national ballot. And the referendum was a question. Do you believe that the national government or the federal government should be responsible for the healthcare needs of the residents in the United States? And the thing that made this really interesting is that they did this in Dunn County, which went for Trump, which voted for Trump in 2016 and in 2020. And the referendum won in Dunn County. And that just goes to show you that this is not about red or blue or purple. This really is about people. Now, a very similar referendum was passed in 2 counties in Illinois as well. And we are working with activists. As I said, we're a grassroots organization that works locally to pass national single payer, and we're working with activists in a tiny little county in Kentucky that I think went like 90% for Trump, and then also in Western Pennsylvania. And so that's one of the campaigns that we have, where we're trying to educate our activists to go basically door knocking, because that's the kind of deep canvassing campaign that you need, where you can start to educate people about what a national health program would look like for them. So that's one of the campaigns that we have that we're really excited about. The other campaign that we have that are sort of local campaigns, or that we try to elevate local campaigns, is that we are helping very, very peripherally with the campaign that's happening with the New York City municipal retirees that are being forced by their union to sign up for Medicare Advantage instead of their traditional Medicare, which is what they were promised for all the years that they were working under the municipal government. And so that's really, really an exciting, and I urge all of your viewers to look this up, the New York City Municipal Retirees, the kind of work that they're doing and the battles that they're winning against actually Mayor Adams and the New York City mayor's office and their unions and their former employers that are trying to push them into these Medicare Advantage plans that, again, would have narrow networks and prior authorizations and so forth. So go ahead.
No, well, I want to make sure to give you time to circle back to the next one, but I also want to lift up and invite Jackrabbit, our producer, into the conversation, because he and I were literally just talking about how we need to make sure to get away from the toxic, like as if left-right has any real meaning, at least amongst the corporatists. And thank you, Z Manny. I'm going to use corporates instead of neoliberals because I think it's probably a more accurate definition, right? But this idea that they're trying to pit, quote, the left and the right against each other, when if you actually break it down on things that people want and policies like healthcare is a human right, there's actually a broad level of support across ideological frameworks, right? And so I don't know about you, Jack, but when I was hearing Anna, I was reminded of our conversation from just a couple of days ago. Oh, you're muted. That's the refrain of COVID.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Anna, thank you so much for being here with us. It's great to be talking to you. And, I'm coming on because, well, for one thing, I'm super angry hearing all the stuff you're talking about. And I'm sure that's like the people who are listening probably feel the same way. I mean, just like talking about this stuff is so infuriating because it's so mean-spirited, barbaric, and cruel, really, when it comes down to it. As soon as you scratch the surface of normality, it becomes just absolutely like unconscionable. But I really love that you guys were talking about this. I feel like what David's story about what happened in California with Schwarzenegger versus Governor Brown really illustrates to me what has become more and more clear as we've come to our present moment, and we've seen what the two major political parties have turned into, just like this tribalism, this Trump derangement syndrome, where like actual policies have just been, they're just lost. They're just like gone into a black hole of like politicking. It's a nightmare, right? And so, I think of like, this does not surprise me to hear David's story. I think of Kamala Harris, who's clearly just like this neoliberal shill, like an empty shell, but she's signed on to Bernie's Medicare for All bill, right? As if she really cared about it, as if it was something that mattered to her. No, she was from California. She's like a liberal politician. She knows who she's appealing to, and so she's using that kind of like as a cover or a mask, and so of course there's this fear and the challenge that we have because powerful Democratic politicians, powerful Republican politicians, whatever, they're going to say in the same way that like Trump claimed to be like supporting the regular person, which is obviously was absurd, in the same way that like the Democrats can say that they support regular people in the same, they're also bullshitting. They're also totally full of crap. So what it comes down to is, what we need to do is we need to leverage power. That leveraging power is only going to come from building a coordinated national movement. That's why I really appreciate where you're coming from with this, right? Because, it's only through leveraging power, and it's only by holding politicians accountable to what we demand from them that we're going to see any change, right? At the national level, there needs to be a national organizing, right? I'm sorry, it's too much. I need to bring it down a notch and just say there's people who are watching who are equally fired up about this. They're disgusted, tired of business as usual. My question to you, my prompt to you is just like, people who want to get engaged, they want to get involved. What can they do? How can they do it? They're just watching this show. They're listening to this show. They love what you're talking about. What can they do to make a difference?
Well, thank you, Jack, for that question and the opportunity to tell you and others what you all can do. So National Single Payer, is a grassroots organization, and what we do is we try to elevate these local campaigns, but we also educate. And so we, the second Wednesday of the month, we have educational webinars, and I'd love to talk with you about the educational webinar that's coming up on October 11th. And if you wanted to put that up there, there is a link that people can use to register for the event. You have to register. It's going to be it's called the Libby Medicare and the Public Health Emergency in East Palestine. So a few things. I think many of us are aware of the train derailment that occurred in East Palestine, which poisoned not only East Palestine, but the surrounding cities and localities in Ohio and even into Pennsylvania, through the burning of the vinyl chloride. And what does that have to do with Medicare for All and for Libby, Montana? And David, you brought up how single-payer activists were not even allowed to testify during the ACA, the Affordable Care Act hearings, because yes, they doctors and nurses were arrested instead of being allowed to mention and talk about single-payer. But one thing that happened during the ACA, which most people don't remember or maybe don't even realize, is that Max Baucus, who was the chair of the Finance Senate Committee that wrote the ACA, actually wrote into the Affordable Care Act a very small little section that is known as 1881, I believe, 1881A. And what that does is it gave the residents of Libby, Montana, which is a city where the senator happens to be from, the ability to qualify for Medicare because they have been exposed to asbestos. And the story is long, and we don't have time to get into it. But this is an area that had been poisoned by a private industry, a mine that poisoned all of the people in that area with asbestos. And over the years, many of them came down with asbestosis and lung problems and many other issues related to the exposure to asbestos. And Max Baucus knew that the only way that these individuals in Libby, Montana were going to be able to have any kind of access to healthcare for the crime that had been perpetrated against them was to have them be automatically eligible for Medicare, no matter what their age. Right? They could be 20, 25, 35, 50. They did not need to qualify for Medicare by age. They would automatically get it if they could just prove that they were living in that area and that they had been exposed to asbestos. So what that little section did is it set up the possibility that for a locality, a city, a county that is being exposed to these environmental disasters, and that they can, first of all, prove that their health is being impacted by this environmental toxic exposure, then they could possibly be eligible for Medicare. So we're calling this Libby Medicare because Libby, Montana did get Medicare as a result of this little tiny section in the Affordable Care Act. And why can't it also be used for residents of East Palestine? And so on October 11th, we've invited Jessica Connard, who is an activist in her city of East Palestine, who's going to be talking to us about the train derailment, about the health effects, about a public health emergency that needs to be declared by President Biden, and about getting Libby Medicare for their residents. So that's October 11th. It's at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. And I think that you all have the link there that's been dropped in the chat, and you can register for this. So that's one thing that people can do. And then that's the second Wednesdays of the month. That's what we do. We have educational webinars, and we just raise awareness about these kind of things. And wouldn't it be amazing to be able to have activists from poisoned communities all over the country, including East Palestine, suffering from environmental health emergencies, to also raise the demand for an emergency health order and Libby Medicare for their own communities. So that's happening October 11th. And then the other thing that I'd like to tell people about is, well, two other things. One is on the fourth Wednesday of the month, we have what we call the National Single Payer Working Group meetings. And that's when we get down to the joy of actually doing the work that you need to do as activists and organizers and mobilizers to achieve national single payer. And so that's a much more open forum and a lot of discussion where we talk about our campaigns and how to elevate what people are doing in their own communities. We also have a podcast, new podcast, and I encourage people to listen to it. It's called The Real McCoy for Healthcare, and it's with Dr. Claire Cohen. Claire is a good friend of mine. She is a Black child psychiatrist in Pittsburgh and puts on a really, really great podcast. So it's called The Real McCoy, and she explains why it's called The Real McCoy in her podcast. So I would encourage people to do both, all of those.
Well, thank you so much for bringing us all of those different opportunities. And as Anna said, I did, in fact, drop the link into the chat. But if you are listening to the podcast or you're watching us or listening to us after the fact and you don't have access to the chat function itself, simply go to the website nationalsinglepayer.com. That's nationalsinglepayer.com. You can sign up on their email list. You can get up to their latest updates. They put out a monthly events and newsletter that actually gives you very practical ways for how to build the necessary ground game to put single payer healthcare front and center as a political issue. Because I'll tell you, friends, like, we're only going to get what we're organized to take and demand. I often will quote one of the great political thinkers in the US, Frederick Douglass, who said, "Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will." And I'll paraphrase the longer part because I think this is pretty important, y'all. Douglass goes on to say, "You show me how much injustice a people are willing to tolerate, and I will show you the exact amount of injustice that will be visited upon them." And to me, like, this is really important. It's back to Jack's point. We have got to have the political courage and the political clarity to hold politicians accountable, to let them know that this is our demand. And if they're not willing to champion healthcare as a human right at the federal level, then they should not be our federal representatives. Period. End of story. And that's something that can be done across ideologies. The second political philosopher that I want to quote, and I want to give a shout out to my mama, because my mama introduced me to this political philosopher. Her name is Lily Tomlin. And Lily Tomlin famously said, no matter how angry I get, it's hard to keep up with these bastards. And it really does, like, the level of chicanery, the level of just outrage that the ruling elite are pulling on us. And I'm going to say it again. I'm going to repeat Jack. The kind of tribalism, the us versus them that the ruling elite are playing on us is actually to our detriment. If we actually are serious about winning a new world, we're going to have to reach across ideologies and build a class-conscious movement. I don't mean socioeconomic class. Like, I mean the people who own the means of production, the owning predatory class versus the rest of us. They get us arguing with each other over things that we have very little agency over. But if we actually unite as a class and get politically conscious, we can win a new world. And so again, and I like, this hour has just flown by, but I do want to give you a chance for any final thoughts here on either the national single payer movement, anything that's come up in this conversation.
So, I mean, I think the final analysis is that the health of a nation cannot be held hostage to the profits of corporations. I think we need to loop back into Naomi Klein's message to us that our healthcare system should be a manifestation of our values, and our values should not be corporate profits. Our values are to take care of each other, the solidarity that we need, the love, the kindness, all of those shared values that we have, and that should be at the center of our healthcare system. And so I think that this is a really, really important conversation that we're having, because the only way we're going to get this is through a national movement. We have to, just as you said, we have to stop thinking about our differences. We need to stop splintering ourselves into multiple different organizations and really demand the healthcare system that we need and that we deserve.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anna Malinow. I'm David Cobb, the host of Redneck Gone Green. We've been talking to Dr. Anna Malinow. She is the national organizer for the National Single Payer Movement to End Privatization of Medicare. Check them out at nationalsinglepayer.com. Remember, we come to you every week here on Redneck Gone Green. I'm very excited to say that next Tuesday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, we're going to be joined by rock and folk singer Carsey Blanton. If you don't know Carsey, you're in for a treat. Carsey is the one, by the way, who on national media called out Joe Manchin in West Virginia. She's a amazing singer, and a shout out to my partner Ruthie, who turned me on to Carsey Blanton. I became a little bit of a fanboy because I do believe that the need for art and culture and joy, which Anna talked about a little bit earlier, is so very important to what we're doing. And I want to conclude to remind you that here at Redneck Gone Green, our audience is getting larger, stronger, and better organized every week. And it's because of you liking, commenting, and sharing it. I want to ask you, please do that. It means so much to us because it helps get these vital conversations in front of more people. I want to thank you so much. I want to thank Dr. Anna Malinow, and I want to thank you, the listener, viewer of Redneck Gone Green. Let's fight for the world that we so desperately need and so richly deserve. Peace.